The stage lights dimmed at Radio City Music Hall, and something was different. Ignazio Boschetto stepped forward, his silhouette sharper, his movements more confident, his presence somehow amplified beyond what thousands of fans remembered. The tenor who had captured hearts across 5 continents with Il Volo stood transformed, not just physically, but in a way that would ripple through every performance, every recording, every dynamic within the trio that had redefined classical crossover music for a generation. What happened to Ignazio wasn't just a personal journey. It became a seismic shift that would test the bonds of brotherhood, challenge the very identity of Il Volo, and ultimately prove that sometimes the greatest transformations happen not in spite of success, but because of it. For years, Ignazio had been the charismatic third of Italy's golden vocal trio, standing alongside Piero Barone and Gianluca Ginobili as they conquered stages from the Sanremo Festival to the Hollywood Bowl. Their voices had blended since they were teenagers, 3 distinct instruments creating something impossibly unified. But behind the sold-out tours and the perfectly harmonized renditions of O Sole Mio and Il Mondo, Ignazio was struggling with something millions could relate to, but few could understand within the pressure cooker of international fame. The camera loved him, audiences adored him, yet when he looked in the mirror, he saw someone trapped between who he was and who he needed to become. The transformation that followed would not only redefine Ignazio Boschetto, it would permanently alter the chemistry, the sound, and the future of Il Volo itself. If you've ever wondered how personal change can reshape artistic legacy, you need to hear this story. Make sure you're subscribed, because what happened next reveals truths about fame, friendship, and finding yourself that go far beyond one man's journey. The beginning of Ignazio's transformation wasn't marked by a single moment, but rather by an accumulation of uncomfortable truths. Il Volo had been performing relentlessly since their formation in 2009, when 3 teenagers from different corners of Italy were brought together on Italian television's Ti lascio una canzone. The chemistry was instantaneous, almost supernatural. Piero's powerful baritone, Gianluca's soaring tenor, and Ignazio's warm, resonant tenor created a sonic triangle that felt both ancient and revolutionary. They were kids singing music their grandparents loved, yet making it feel urgent and new. Within months, they were international sensations. Within years, they were performing for presidents and popes. But fame at that velocity comes with costs that aren't immediately visible. For Ignazio, those costs manifested in ways both physical and psychological. The constant travel, the irregular schedules, the meals grabbed between sound checks and interviews, the pressure to always be on. It all took its toll. More than that, there was the subtle but persistent sense of being perceived rather than seen, of being a role rather than a person. In hundreds of interviews, Ignazio played the jovial one, the fun-loving member of the trio, the guy who could make everyone laugh. It was authentic, but it wasn't complete. Something was missing, and that absence grew heavier with each passing year. The transformation began quietly, almost privately, in 2019. Ignazio started making different choices about his health, his lifestyle, his approach to the grueling demands of their schedule. Those close to the group noticed small changes first. Ignazio arriving at rehearsals with different energy, declining after-show celebrations that once would have been automatic, spending time alone in ways that seemed almost meditative. Piero and Gianluca, his brothers in everything but blood, watched with a mixture of support and confusion. They had known each other's rhythms for over a decade. This new rhythm was unfamiliar. What the public eventually saw was dramatic. Ignazio emerged in 2020 and beyond with a completely transformed physique, having lost a significant amount of weight and gained a visible dedication to fitness and wellness that seemed almost impossibly disciplined for someone maintaining Il Volo's touring schedule. The before and after images circulated across social media like wildfire, drawing both celebration and scrutiny. Fans who had loved him exactly as he was felt a complicated mix of pride and loss. New audiences discovered Il Volo through Ignazio's transformation story, drawn by the human drama before they ever heard the music. But the real story wasn't happening in Instagram posts or magazine features. It was happening in rehearsal rooms, on tour buses, and in the subtle recalibration of a musical partnership that had always depended on an almost psychic connection between three distinct personalities. Hit that like button if you're seeing just how deep this transformation really goes, because what happened to the music itself will surprise you. The first time the transformed Ignazio stood with Piero and Gianluca for a full rehearsal after the most dramatic phase of his physical change, the air was thick with things unsaid. They had always communicated as much through glances and gestures as through words. You don't harmonize at the level Il Volo does without that kind of unspoken language. But now, something in the vocabulary had shifted. Ignazio's presence was different, not better or worse, but altered in ways that affected the entire dynamic. He stood differently, breathed differently, projected differently, and in a musical form as precise as operatic pop, where millimeters of vocal placement and micrograms of breath control determine whether a phrase soars or falls flat. These differences mattered enormously. The changes weren't just visual. Ignazio's voice had evolved too, though in ways that would only become apparent over time and multiple performances. Increased cardiovascular fitness meant greater breath control and stamina during the long, demanding phrases that characterized Il Volo's repertoire. Weight loss affected resonance and projection in subtle but real ways. The human body is the tenor's instrument, and changing that body changes the instrument. Some long-time fans and vocal experts noted that Ignazio's tone had brightened slightly, gained a certain clarity in the upper register that hadn't been there before. Others felt they detected more vulnerability in his phrasing, as though the emotional walls that protection and performance had built up were beginning to thin. Piero and Gianluca had to adjust too, though this aspect of the story rarely gets told. When you've spent over a decade learning to match your breath, your phrasing, your emotional intensity to two other voices, and one of those voices begins to change, you face a choice. Resist the change and try to pull things back to familiar territory, or evolve alongside it and discover what new territory might offer. To their credit, Piero and Gianluca chose evolution, but it wasn't seamless. There were rehearsals that felt frustrating, performances where the blend wasn't quite right, moments of tension that tested their brotherhood in ways that early success and youthful enthusiasm never had. The public saw none of this struggle, of course. They saw three immaculately dressed young men delivering flawless performances of Grande Amore and Nessun Dorma, hitting every note with the precision that had made them stars. But those who knew Il Volo intimately, their producers, their longtime crew, their closest collaborators, could sense the recalibration happening in real time. It was like watching a complicated equation being solved, with Ignazio's transformation as the variable that forced every other element to find new values. The deeper truth, the one that makes Ignazio's transformation so significant beyond the obvious physical changes, is what it represented about the courage to disrupt success. Il Volo was working. They were selling out arenas, topping classical crossover charts, maintaining a devoted global fan base. The formula was proven. In that context, any major change by any member becomes a risk, not just to individual comfort, but to collective achievement. Ignazio's decision to fundamentally transform himself, knowing it would affect the delicate equilibrium of the group, showed either tremendous selfishness or tremendous bravery, depending on how you looked at it. What became clear over time was that it was bravery, because Ignazio understood something crucial. Without change, they would eventually become a nostalgia act, a trio trapped in amber, performing the same songs the same way for audiences who loved them for what they were rather than what they could become. Share this video with anyone who loves Il Volo, or anyone who's ever had to choose between comfort and growth, because this next part reveals the crisis that almost broke them. The crisis came in early 2021 during preparations for what would become their 10th anniversary project. The pandemic had already forced unprecedented changes to their touring schedule, giving all three members unexpected time for reflection and individual pursuits. Ignazio had used that time to deepen his transformation, working with trainers and nutritionists, developing routines and disciplines that he knew would be harder to maintain once touring resumed. But when they finally reunited to begin work on new material, the tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface boiled over. The argument, according to sources close to the group who spoke on condition of anonymity, wasn't about Ignazio's physical transformation directly. It was about everything that transformation represented. Piero, the powerhouse baritone who had always been the unofficial musical director of the group, felt that the focus on Ignazio's personal journey was overshadowing their collective artistry. Magazine interviews that should have been about their music increasingly centered on Ignazio's weight loss and lifestyle changes. Social media engagement surged around Ignazio's transformation posts, while their actual musical content seemed to generate less excitement. Gianluca, ever the peacemaker, found himself mediating between his two brothers, trying to honor both Piero's concerns about their musical identity and Ignazio's need for personal autonomy and recognition of his growth. The breaking point came during a recording session for Il Volo Sings Morricone, their tribute to the legendary Italian composer. They were working on C, one of Morricone's most emotionally demanding pieces, and something wasn't working. The blend was off, the emotional coherence was missing, and after multiple takes, Piero stopped the session and said what had been unspoken for months. "We're not the same group anymore, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but we can't pretend everything's fine." The studio went silent. Their producer, Michel Torpedine, who had worked with them for years, knew this was a moment that would either destroy Il Volo or reforge them into something new. What followed was hours of conversation, the kind of raw, uncomfortable dialogue that forces people to either deepen their connection or admit it's broken. Ignazio spoke about feeling invisible for years despite being constantly visible, about the specific loneliness of being perceived as just the fun one, or the third member, in a trio where Piero and Gianluca often got more musical recognition. He talked about how the transformation wasn't about vanity or attention. It was about finding himself in a life that had been largely scripted since he was 15 years old. He needed to know who Ignazio Boschetto was separate from Il Volo, not to leave the group, but to be more fully present in it. Piero and Gianluca heard him, really heard him, perhaps for the first time in years. And in that hearing, something shifted. Piero admitted his fear that change would cost them the magic that had defined their success, that in becoming something new, they might lose what made them special. Gianluca confessed his own struggles with identity and purpose within the group, his sense that maybe they all needed to evolve or risk becoming caricatures of their younger selves. By the end of that conversation, they hadn't resolved everything, but they had done something more important. They had chosen each other again, consciously and intentionally, not out of obligation or contract, but out of genuine brotherhood and shared purpose. The music they made after that conversation was different. You can hear it in Il Volo Sings Morricone, and in their subsequent performances. There's a vulnerability and emotional authenticity that wasn't there before, or wasn't there in the same way. Ignazio's transformation had forced all three of them to transform, to examine who they were individually and collectively, and to bring that examination into their artistry. Comment below about the moment you realized Il Volo had changed, because what happens next shows how that change rippled out to their global audience. When Il Volo returned to touring in late 2021 and into 2022, audiences immediately sensed something different. The visual change in Ignazio was obvious and became a talking point at every concert, but the deeper change was harder to articulate. The performances had a different quality, more intimate somehow, despite the large venues. The banter between the three felt less rehearsed, more genuine. They were taking more risks musically, stretching arrangements, attempting more challenging material, engaging with their audience in ways that felt less like a polished show and more like a shared experience. Ignazio's stage presence had evolved dramatically. The transformation had given him a confidence that translated into more dynamic movement, more powerful gestures, a willingness to own the spotlight in ways he previously might have deflected to Piero or Gianluca. Some longtime fans struggled with this change, feeling that the Ignazio they had fallen in love with was somehow gone. Fan forums and social media groups split between those who celebrated his transformation and those who mourned the loss of the old Ignazio. This division, painful as it was for some, actually revealed something important about parasocial relationships and the complicated dynamics of fandom. The people we admire don't owe us changelessness, even when we love them for who they were. For Piero and Gianluca, performing alongside the transformed Ignazio required their own adjustments. They had to share space differently on stage, recalibrate their performance dynamics, and navigate the reality that media attention and fan focus had shifted significantly toward Ignazio. Lesser artists might have let this create lasting resentment. That Piero and Gianluca instead chose to celebrate Ignazio's journey publicly, posting supportive messages and speaking admiringly in interviews about his dedication and transformation, speaks to the genuine depth of their connection. But it would be naive to think there weren't private moments of frustration or jealousy. They're human, and the spotlight's fickleness can sting even when you love the person receiving its attention. The transformation's impact on Il Volo extended beyond interpersonal dynamics to their actual market position and artistic trajectory. They began attracting different audiences, younger fans drawn to Ignazio's transformation narrative and social media presence, fitness enthusiasts who appreciated his discipline and dedication, people who might never have given classical crossover a chance, but became curious about the group behind the transformation story. This new audience overlapped with their traditional base of classical music lovers and opera enthusiasts, created interesting tensions in their concert programming and marketing approach. How do you serve both the grandmother, who's loved Il Volo since their beginning, and the 25-year-old who discovered them through Instagram? Musically, Ignazio's transformation coincided with and perhaps facilitated Il Volo's gradual evolution toward more contemporary sounds while maintaining their classical roots. Their 2022 album showed this evolution clearly. Traditional Italian songs and operatic standards alongside more modern arrangements and even some original contemporary pieces. Ignazio's increased vocal confidence and stamina allowed him to attempt more technically demanding passages, pushing Piero and Gianluca to match that ambition. The result was their most musically adventurous work to date, polarizing some purist fans, but earning critical respect for their willingness to grow beyond their original formula. The transformation also affected their individual projects and pursuits. Ignazio began accepting solo opportunities that he might previously have declined, hosting gigs, brand partnerships, media appearances that capitalized on his transformation story, and expanding public profile. This created new scheduling challenges and required the trio to negotiate boundaries around individual versus collective work. These negotiations, handled well, strengthened their partnership by establishing clearer individual identities within the collective. Handled poorly, they could have fragmented the group entirely. That Il Volo emerged stronger suggests they navigated these conversations with maturity and mutual respect. If this story is resonating with you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the final chapter reveals where Il Volo stands today and what Ignazio's transformation ultimately meant. 3 years past the most dramatic phase of Ignazio's transformation, Il Volo stands at an interesting crossroads. They're no longer the fresh-faced teenagers who burst onto the international scene with youthful charm and improbable talent. They're men now, in their late 20s and early 30s, veterans of an industry that chews up and spits out even the most talented artists. Ignazio's transformation, rather than being a distraction or disruption, has arguably given the group relevance and resonance it might otherwise have lost in the transition from prodigies to mature artists. The transformation's most profound impact may be the permission it gave all three members to evolve publicly and artistically. Piero has spoken more openly in recent interviews about his own struggles with perfectionism and anxiety, vulnerabilities he might have felt compelled to hide in the pre-transformation era when maintaining a polished image seemed paramount. Gianluca has pursued acting and other creative projects with more confidence, no longer feeling confined to a narrow identity within the group. Ignazio's willingness to be seen in transformation, imperfect, struggling, changing, created space for all of them to be more fully human in public view. This humanization has deepened their connection with audiences in ways that pure vocal talent alone might not have achieved. People who might have admired Il Volo from a distance now feel they know them, understand their struggles, and can relate to their journeys. This emotional investment translates to loyalty that transcends changing musical trends or the inevitable evolution of their sound. Fans who might have drifted away as the group matured beyond their teenage novelty have instead stayed engaged, curious to see what comes next, invested in their continued growth. The musical impact continues to reveal itself in subtle ways. Their most recent performances show a group that's comfortable taking risks, comfortable with silence and space in their arrangements, comfortable allowing each voice to shine individually while still creating that signature Il Volo blend. Ignazio's voice has settled into its transformed instrument, brighter in some registers, more focused in others, capable of sustained power that comes from genuine physical fitness and vocal health. Piero and Gianluca have evolved alongside him, their voices also maturing and deepening, creating new harmonic possibilities that their younger selves couldn't have accessed. The group's approach to repertoire has shifted too, incorporating more diverse material and showing greater willingness to experiment while still honoring the classical and traditional Italian music that remains their foundation. This balance, honoring heritage while embracing evolution, mirrors Ignazio's personal transformation journey and suggests it has become a template for the group's artistic philosophy. They're not abandoning who they were, but they're refusing to be trapped by it. Looking at Il Volo today, it's clear that Ignazio's transformation did something crucial. It forced a reckoning with identity, purpose, and artistic direction at exactly the moment when such a reckoning was necessary. Without it, they might have continued successfully for years, delivering technically perfect performances that gradually became less emotionally resonant, less artistically vital. The transformation injected urgency and authenticity back into their work, reminding them and their audiences that art without evolution is eventually just nostalgia. The challenges haven't disappeared. Maintaining their vocal blend as all three continue to mature and change requires constant attention and adjustment. Balancing individual pursuits with collective commitments remains a delicate negotiation. Managing diverse audience expectations, from purists who want them to stay classical to new fans drawn by contemporary elements, requires careful programming and communication. These are good problems, the kind that come from having options and opportunities, rather than being locked into a single path. Ignazio himself has spoken with increasing eloquence about what the transformation meant beyond the physical changes. In a 2023 interview, he reflected, "I needed to prove to myself that I could change something so fundamental, not because I hated who I was, but because I needed to know I was more than what people saw. The voice was always mine, the person was always me, but I was living in a way that didn't match how I wanted to feel. When I changed that, everything else changed too. How I sang, how I stood on stage, how I related to Piero and Gianluca, how I thought about our future. I became more myself, which sounds simple but was the hardest thing I've ever done." That honesty captures something essential about what Ignazio's transformation represents. Not a rejection of who he was, but a claiming of who he could become. And in claiming that for himself, he inadvertently gave permission for Il Volo as a collective to make the same claim, to refuse the comfortable trap of repeating past successes, and instead risk growing into something new and perhaps even more meaningful. The permanent impact on Il Volo isn't just about how they sound or look or perform, though all those elements have changed. It's about what they represent. Three artists who could have coasted on early success, but chose instead to keep challenging themselves and each other, who valued growth over comfort, authenticity over image, and artistic evolution over commercial safety. In an entertainment landscape that often rewards staying in your lane and giving audiences exactly what they expect, Il Volo's willingness to evolve in response to Ignazio's transformation shows a different kind of courage. Their story continues to unfold, with new tours, new recordings, new challenges ahead. But the transformation that began with one member's personal journey has become woven into the group's DNA, a permanent part of their identity and artistic legacy. Future generations discovering Il Volo will find a group that refused to be static, that valued individual growth as much as collective harmony, and that understood that the greatest tribute to your past success is having the courage to risk it for future evolution. Ignazio Boschetto's transformation permanently impacted Il Volo by doing something rare and precious. It kept them alive as artists, not just as performers. It reminded them and their audiences that the human voice, for all its technical demands and classical traditions, is ultimately an expression of a complete person, body, and soul together. When that person changes, the voice changes. When the voice changes, the art changes. And when the art changes with honesty and courage, it doesn't just survive, it transcends. That's the real story behind the transformation, beyond the before and after photos and the social media speculation. Three brothers, bound by music and choice rather than blood, choosing each other again and again, even when, especially when, change made that choice harder. The result is a group that's more than the sum of its parts, more interesting than its origin story, more vital than many acts half their age, and still reaching for something higher with every performance.